Thanks for joining, guys. It's good to spend some time with you. We got some good content to go over today.
Yes, indeed. We're going to go into it and we'll get started. We'll go slow to start out with because Frank and I will do the intros. We're glad everybody joined today. A little bit about Frank and I. So I'll go first, Frank. I am the co-founder of Playlister. So Playlister is a church presentation tool that is used by over 8,000 kids ministries across the world. It was built by our other co-founder, Kevin Smith, in Indianapolis, Indiana at Northview Church. It was a way just to better serve smaller rooms with kiddos in it because most of the time those rooms on those TVs, they got USB sticks, they got ProPresenter, and this is a way to use an Apple TV. We'll chat about it a little bit later on, but it's cool that we get to serve 8,000 ministries every single week. And I'm also the father of a 5- and 6-year-old and a former substitute teacher. So I was a building sub at Skiles Test Elementary School, and I got to go in every single day to a new classroom, grade 1 through 5, and talk and teach in front of, anywhere from 20 to 38-year-old, 9-year-olds. So I know how terrifying that can be. I know how exhilarating that can be too. So we're going to talk a little bit about that in the presentation as well. And then Frank's joining me from Tidely. Frank, I'll let you do your intro.
Yeah. Good to be with you, Grant. And yes, I would be terrified to be a substitute teacher of any sort. So,
I had it pretty good though. I was like one of the only male teachers, and the fact that I was like 25, they were like, "This is the coolest guy ever." So they usually cooperated and listened to me. So I had it pretty easy.
Yeah, that's awesome. Well, I'm with Tidely. I'm one of the founding team members. Tidely makes technology for churches. Today, we're talking obviously a lot about kids and kids safety and the kids environment. One of the tools we make is called Breeze Church Management, where we do kids check-in. So providing the technology for churches to run their check-in on the weekends for all their kids' classes and other things. And we serve about just over 35,000 churches. We're about 8 years old. I'm a dad of triplet 10-year-old boys who are in 5th grade.
Triplets.
Yeah, the 3 little dudes, wild animals. But they're awesome. Being a dad's great. And yeah, we live out in San Diego, California. And man, excited to talk about kids and kids safety and check-in today.
Yeah. And then real quick, what were the boys for Halloween?
Oh, the boys all decided. So I was like I wore a onesie, the onesie costumes where you just put it on and zip it up.
Onesies are great.
It's the best.
That should be a thing.
Me and mommy are like onesie skeletons, like super basic. This year, my kids decided that they wanted to be scary clowns. And I don't know. Yeah. They've gone through we're the superheroes and we're the Transformers and G.I. Joes and all that kind of stuff. They've done those kind of things for years. And then this year they're like, oh, we want to be scary clowns. I'm like, where did you get this idea from? But yeah, that's what they were.
Couldn't rope that in on the scary. You're not giving up the onesie no matter what.
I
wore a onesie. I almost wore it today to the webinar.
I'm sending a shout out to Tracy because she's the grandmother of triplet 5-year-old boys. And we affectionately call our grandmothers Grammy, and our Grammys of our triplet 10-year-old boys are amazing. They were actually here. One of them was here and Grandpa were here for Halloween. And man, Grammys are awesome and they love it. They love to come see the boys and then leave and leave them back to us.
Right. All right. You got this now. They seemed a little hyped on this candy that I gave to them. Oh, yeah, that's so true. Well, we're going to jump into what is going to be the 3 biggest problems and how to solve it. So one of the things that Frank and I crafted is like, okay, we're going to talk about problems, but more importantly, as I think entrepreneurs were equally as interested in this solving problems. So we're going to give you guys the answers to what we believe are the 3 biggest problems in kids ministry. And we've seen this just working for combined a decade with 50,000 churches combined and talking to different customers. Certain things bubble to the top. Some of what we have to say might be groundbreaking, and some of it might be you're nodding your head, yes, we've heard this before. Hopefully we've got some new stuff in here. This is my big number one. And It's fear of public speaking. And we often see this just at any church. The kids pastors are super friendly and love public speaking. And what they oftentimes, I think, need to take into consideration is the fact that 3/4 of the American population would rather die than get in front of any room to speak, would rather die. So this is something that I think puts a barrier up when you're trying to get new volunteers. You might have half your congregation that raises their hand, I would love to volunteer for Kids Men. And you'd say, great, come in. Here's a room full of 27-year-olds, and we're going to have you talk to them about X. Now, that can be exhilarating, and it can also be terrifying. So what are the ways that you can make it more exhilarating and less terrifying? And this came up a lot when I was a substitute teacher. The classrooms you would go into where the teacher had a set agenda for the day, like she knew she was going to be out that day, so she wrote down the lesson plan. You knew what the lesson plan was. Whew, that was a lot more relaxing experience. Where you were just flying by the seat of your pants, it was terrifying. And oftentimes the volunteers that come in get a couple of notes, and then they're like, hey, do this, do that, and then that can be quite overwhelming. And this is where what we found is implementing technology in the classroom that is simple, easy to use, and it's a presentation tool. So what you really need in every classroom is some type of presentation tool. Now, why? Why do you need a presentation tool? It is a crutch for new beginners that they can lean on the slides, right? Anyone giving a presentation can get more comfortable when there's video, when there's slides, when there's ways that you can get through talking to a big group of people and get more comfortable as you do it. Now, how you use the technology is very critical. I've been in some rooms where you got to hook up like the laptop, you got to make sure it's on the right input. So not only are you talking to 27-year-olds, the 27-year-olds are supposed to be sitting there quietly while you figure out how to troubleshoot the technology. So it's critical that when volunteers walk in, they just click one button and everything works and everything is on. And that's what Playlister does with an Apple TV. I won't get too much into that right now. I think what's critical for everybody to understand with problem number one and solution number one is a lot of your volunteers or would-be volunteers have this phobia to some degree of public speaking. And if you get some sort of presentation tool inside of your classroom, it's going to make a huge difference, not only attracting volunteers, but retaining volunteers. So I want to talk a little bit about retaining volunteers where they love it after the first time. If you're using video and curriculum from providers like Lifeway and Orange, they give you a lot of great stuff that makes the conversations with the kiddos even better, right? It gets them going, they answer questions, they get excited. And that's where properly using the curriculum with the presentation tool just enhances that kid experience and the volunteer experience. You walk out with that high, and all the kids loved it. They were listening, they were laughing, they were raising your hand. I'm coming back. That was amazing. So that's what's really critical and important. Yeah, Frank.
And I'm just gonna, maybe a comment or a question, because I'm a dad that has served in kids ministry a ton, and obviously you have too, and you've even gone to the next level and done it as a teacher and all that. And I love that you're like, most people getting volunteers, number one, is already hard, and then getting volunteers to speak is kind of like next level volunteerism, right? It's like being an usher or maybe a greeter or helping in the parking lot or certain things where it's like, okay, I feel like I can do that, is like one level, but then I got to go speak, and I got to speak in front of kids sometimes is even like another level of fear. So I think you're kind of stacking things on top of each other when you talk about getting into kids ministry and teaching in front of them. What I also love about what Playlister does is like the tech is all there, and if you put it with the curriculum and it's already loaded, like you've mentioned to me numerous times, like people have to bring USB sticks or DVDs or print out a bunch of material, like all this other stuff that makes it difficult on that volunteer. And having it all there set up with great curriculum ready, man, that's like such a stress reliever, right? Because they're all getting their families ready for church too, when they're trying to get there to teach their classes.
Yeah. And I always push volunteers to speak or try to participate in kids ministry, because I don't know, maybe this is just me, and maybe everybody at this webinar can relate to it. Interacting with a group of kids gives you the biggest high, because of they're just contagious with excitement and wanting to understand and learn. And you really feel an engagement level there that you can't replicate with adults, in my experience. And that's where it's like, hey, you got to try this, just because I think you're really going to enjoy it. And I think the kids are going to like you. And I've noticed too that having an Apple TV attracts older volunteers too. So we typically, your teenagers are the famous people in the room, right? All the kids want like the 18-year-old that's in student ministry that comes over and can sing and dance, and they all love them. But sometimes you want those 50, 60, 7-year-old volunteers to come in, and them having a way to engage with technology with the Apple TV is super simple, because it's single click, which is important. We saw at our church, and that's part of the reason we developed Playlister. And one of the questions I saw in the QA is it Apple TV only? And the answer is yes. And the reason that we're seeing a trend of people utilizing Apple TVs just across the board is because how simple it is. It's just click, 2 clicks, and all the curriculum. So if your churches use Orange, Lifeway, your own curriculum, a combination of the 3, it stores to the Apple TV. So the Apple TV is the only device that has 32 gigabits of storage, where the curriculum stays there and it works without Wi-Fi. Why is this great? Well, I've never been in a church where there wasn't some sort of Wi-Fi problem on Sunday, at least for like a minute or two. And this way, the presentation tools are all going to work. All of the curriculum's going to work, and it doesn't even require Wi-Fi. So that's why we use the Apple TV. It's simple to point and click. You can hand a remote over to a 7-year-old, they know how to use it, or a 7-year-old, they know how to use it. My daughter uses it. She presents, and it also stores all the content. So this is a big one, and one that we've seen a lot of kids pastors talk about, right? It just makes it easier on the volunteers, is why you need a presentation tool, any sort of presentation tool. Now, there are downsides to using USB sticks and computers in some instances. I will say this, try to have some way to present in the rooms that the volunteers can use and interact with. That's super simple. It's just going to make your ability to attract new volunteers and retain existing volunteers much, much easier. All right, so this is the meat of the presentation. This is the one I like, because we're going to use some data here. And because Frank and I are helping churches with technology, both of our organizations are really data driven. So we're going to get into some data points and talk a little bit more about how your church can use certain data points that's happening in kids ministry to make more informed decisions. So let's jump into it. All right, so burnout, and we're going to do a poll here as we go through these. So I'm gonna go through, have a poll everybody can answer, because we're curious to hear back from everybody on the webinar, like, hey, what are the causes of burnout? We think we've identified the top 3, so let's jump into it. Odds are 25% of your staff is burnt out right now, but let's get into the reasons why and how we can fix that. And we think we've got some interesting data points here that you might not have heard before. So the first one is this ratio of kids to adults. So what does this mean? All right, this is a simple gauge you can look at. If you've got 1,000 adults coming to your church on Sunday and you have 200 to 300 kids, someone is stressed thin and burned out. This is a metric you can just look at that you can then know, okay, we probably have some sort of problem somewhere. I need to get my head up. I need to look around, and I need to see who's stressed out. What are they doing? Because this is a marker that indicates you probably need to find more volunteers or hire additional staff. And this is a number that holds true. And I don't think a lot of churches talk about it, because we've had several customer conversations where we talk about burnout and then we say, well, why is that? And it kind of starts getting to like the 5 whys. If they answer a question, it's like, well, there's, a lot of kids showing up. Like, well, why is that? It's like, well, new families are coming. Well, why are new families coming? And then you look at the data point and you're like, oh, wow, you've got 300 kids and there's 1,000 parents showing up. Like, let's talk about your staff. Like, what are you doing there? So this is a metric that I think you can use to easily identify that there probably is some sort of burnout issue. And you can then use this data point as a conversation starter. What I've often found is just starting the conversation is difficult because it's subjective, right? You're just kind of like, hey, I feel like, we're overworked. It's subjective. This is a data point where you can easily say, you know what? We've got 1,000 parents showing up, 300 kids. We know based off of that ratio and data point that there's going to be certain problems occurring. Let's talk about where we see these and maybe can hire or find additional volunteers to help us unlock that.
I mean, you might be pumped that you have that many kids come in and your church is, doing well too. But I think it's an important point, right? You want to make sure that you can actually handle it and you've got the right staff and volunteer ratio to your kids. But anybody out there with 1,000 folks and 300 kids, man, that's awesome. Just train up those volunteers.
It is. I've heard it. We were in Texas. This was a stat that came up. Everyone was like, wow, that's amazing. It's sort of that, you're growing so much, you're going to encounter growing pains, and you need to be cognizant of this number.
This is probably true, even because I don't know the makeup of the churches listening or that will listen to this. But even if you're a 200 member church and you've got, 50 kids, right? Like that's still a lot of kids. 25 to 50 kids. You're 200 and you're probably focused. Like you probably don't have a big staff or a lot of paid staff, and you're focusing on, the weekend experience and preaching, and maybe you have a worship person and all that. So you start to go, man, how do I really focus on kids? Is it all volunteer led? Do I even have a staff position doing this yet? Right? If I'm that 200 member church, I might not have a staff person doing it. So even more important to like make it super easy for the volunteers to do their job easily, right? Like to make it a joy for them as best you can.
Yeah, a joy for them. And this, I think, works both ways. And you sort of alluded to this, where you can use this number to say, oh man, we've got 1,000 adults and 50 kids. Like, so you can kind of use this marker of like, okay, 20 to 30% is going great. You probably need help. And then below 20%, it's sort of like, well, what can we do to improve that ratio? Do we need to reach out to younger families? Do we need to have like neighborhood groups that send out and go out to new families in the neighborhood? Do we need to reach out to neighborhood associations to welcome new families in the neighborhood and tell them a little bit about the church? Like, it also gives you an indicator of like if there's room for improvement. So that's why I just love this ratio of kids to adults. It allows you to unlock so many different conversations that you can have with your team.
Yeah.
All right, this is a fun one, and often a hot topic if you get a lot of kids pastors around is service times. And we had this conversation, I think 2 weeks ago with a customer of Playlisters, and they talked about how service times are a lot like a bike. You should have two, like a bike should have two wheels. And sometimes you see a bike with one wheel, and sometimes you see a bike with three wheels, and it looks exciting, it looks cool, but oftentimes a little bit, you don't know what's going on. And that's with the service times. 3 service times on a Sunday, and many of you were probably shaking your heads yes, often leads to a service time that doesn't have enough volunteers, not enough kids are there, you've got highs and lows, so it just causes the stress. 1 service time, everybody's there, that's usually, at least it's game time when that happens. 2 is ideal. So this 3 service times might be putting an undue stress on the entire staff. And if you can figure out like which one of those service times isn't getting a ton of volunteer engagement or isn't get a ton of kids coming to the service, that can be a discussion with the leadership team. Then just every single church that we work with that's doing, I think, well on the burnout front, and the growth front has really had an open conversation about service times. And this isn't a hard and fast rule. You can certainly, I think, flex to different service times depending on the season. It is something, again, that should be an ongoing topic of conversation.
Middle service struggling.
Middle service always struggling. I mean that's what we found, right? Is like, hey, nobody's here for the volunteer, and you got to be careful. Middle service, I've heard, in like our folks that are in Central, Mountain, and Pacific time. You really got to know if NFL, when they're playing. For instance, in Texas, the Dallas Cowboys, if it's a home game at noon and you've got an 11 o'clock service, you just need to know that weeks beforehand, because that's going to dramatically impact what's going on there. It's kind of silly to talk about to a degree, but then it also dramatically impacts staffing, which then directly correlates with burnout. So if service time, when the NFL is playing, I know that could be like, really, are we talking about that? But I mean, it's going to put stress on your team depending on the volume of people coming into the building. And those are huge factors that come into play when you're talking about getting the right amount of volunteers and staff helping the kids every Sunday.
Right. Yeah. I mean, it's all about, like, on one hand, it's a growth strategy, right? Like adding services is a way to grow. But on the other hand, you just got to be really careful, because like, if you're trying to do that and you're relying on sometimes, maybe oftentimes, the same volunteers to be at all three services or two of the three services, or somebody ends up like covering for other people often, right? Like, so they're the lead, kidsman person, but they had to cover because the second service person can't show up every so often. And then all of a sudden that person is doing multiple services way more than they should. And that'll lead to burnout, right? And if you stack that on top of the other things we've been talking about, right? Like the tech is hard, or training isn't great, and all those kind of things, like you're asking a lot of folks. So, and they have great hearts, right? These people want to serve. So I think it's like we're relying on people's hearts to serve and love God and love the kids. But we really want to do a good job making it a great experience for them so they can do it with longevity, right? And stick around.
Yeah. Just knowing, like, to quote G.I. Joe, now I know knowing's half the battle, right? And this is the battle that you're talking about, is like just being cognizant of what the volunteers are going through. And that segues into the final one, which is curriculum prep. Curriculum prep is really the unsung hero here, where this is a tedious work getting the curriculum ready. So if you're using Lifeway, Grow, Orange curriculum, oftentimes it takes days worth of time to get that ready for all the rooms, especially if you're a larger church, right? Just getting the presentation ready in ProPresenter, loading up the USB sticks, taking that to all the rooms, downloading stuff from Lifeway and uploading it then to where you need it to go. This is very tedious work that oftentimes volunteers do. Like, you'll have a volunteer take 30 USB sticks and walk around to every room, put them in the TV, and make sure the TV's in the right input. Like, you'll get a volunteer to do that. We had that in my prior experiences. That volunteer would probably be excited, but you need to be cognizant. That's like tedious, hard work that you should thank them for. And this curriculum prep oftentimes is just something that is out of sight, out of mind, but takes a ton of time to get right. And that's where, with Playlister, we try to make that easier. So you can use any type of curriculum inside of Playlister. So Lifeway, Grow, Orange, all of it work. We have a direct integration with Orange curriculum where it all just appears in your account, and we have pre-built lessons. So what would take days to get ready in just one click, it takes about 5 minutes, and then it magically shows up in all the rooms. So we're trying to be really thoughtful in the hidden areas of ministry where you're like, oh, curriculum prep, that doesn't take a lot of time. But then you stop and think about it. You're like, wait a second, we got to download all the curriculum, and I got to upload it to here, and then I got to go, whoa. And then you start calculating the time, and you're like, oh my gosh, like, you can start to see where days of tedious work comes into play, and you're oftentimes involving many team members and many volunteers in this entire preparation cycle. And you're probably having meetings about it. We've done studies that show like you're doing anywhere from 8 hours to 40 hours worth of work in curriculum prep. Now that's awesome, because the more you prepare for curriculum, I think the better your Sunday is going to be. And those curriculum providers give you fantastic material to help facilitate conversations with the kids. It's just that what we call the last mile. How do I get it from Orange, and how do I then put it on my TV for Sunday in a way that I can present to the kids? What we want to do is take that 40 hours and make it 10 minutes. And that's what you can do when you utilize Playlister with any curriculum provider. So this is one that I think is number one. And we're going to open up the poll here. So I just launched the poll. So we've got the three, right? Why do your church staff get burnt out? Is it kids to adult ratio is number one? We got 3 service times, and then time spent on curriculum. So the votes are coming in, and I like to see what we've got here. So, all right, it's looking like the kids to adult ratio is coming into play. We've got the time spent. So, all right, we're still waiting. We got 42 of the 65 votes. Frank, what do you think it's going to be?
I was trying to vote. It's not letting me, I mean, it's either going to be kids to adults or time spent on curriculum. I'm going to go with kids to adults as the leader.
Yeah. I know in some of those neighborhoods, especially where we live, yeah, there's oftentimes definitely 2 kids to 2 adults. So it's like a 50% ratio.
Yeah.
Especially those churches that are super family friendly. You have above 30%. And that's looking like it's the leader in the clubhouse right now. So we got the number one reason that the church staff gets burnt out is the kids to adult ratio is too high. So yeah, if that's the case, use this presentation as a way to bring up the data point with your team, have that thoughtful discussion on how you can improve it. And that's going to be a great way. And we're going to have the recording for this entire webinar sent out to everybody afterwards, so you can use it as a conversation starter too. So that's great. Thank you everybody for
I think Renee threw in a great one. I'm just throwing a shout out. She said throw in being fully portable at 3 campuses, and that's a whole other category that causes burnout. Yes, that is true. I've been part of a portable church for nearly 20 years, so I completely get it. It's a whole another level of volunteer engagement, and burnout is real. So great call out.
Yes. Yeah, that is. All right. So we're going to go on to now the third problem and a solution for it. And this is one that Frank has a lot of area and expertise, and so does Tidely. And this is really very important. I think everybody is going to nod their head to this. This is an earth-shattering data point here. 89% of parents rank safety as being very important in a school or church environment. If you just watch the news cycle, you're oftentimes exposed to why. I mean, I'm actually shocked this isn't like 100%. Yeah. This is very, 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 very important. And it all starts with check-in. So check-in is extremely important. I'm going to let Frank describe the check-in experience and why it is important. I'm going to chime in because I'm a big fan of a smooth check-in, especially with a 5- and 6-year-old going to church, on Sunday. It's got to run smooth. And then I know Tidely does it. Heck, with, triplets, I'm sure checking in was something that was often top of mind. So Frank, tell us a little bit about how check-in is, something that can be thoughtfully discussed at a church, and then how you can implement some solutions to improve it.
Yeah. And again, we're not quite sure what the makeup of churches are listening, or the folks that will listen. And there's lots of ways check-in happens. I mean, I've been part of churches where you go to check your kids in, and maybe there's 4 classrooms for the various age groups, but you kind of walk up to each one, and there's like a check-in at each classroom, and you actually just sign in on a piece of paper. right? It's almost looks like an Excel grid. You write your kids' names down, you sign it, you sign the check-in time, and then you come back to pick them up and you sign the checkout time. And it's just all paper and it's in binders. And, that's how churches did it for a long time. And that's not necessarily bad, but I think when it comes to kind of having a great kids ministry process and safety being part of it, parents nowadays, technology is just a big deal, right? So I think there's kind of two big parts that I'll just talk about. We won't spend tons of time here, but there's two big parts for check-in to be awesome in the safety component, right? There's the volunteer part of all of this, or the staff part of this, and then there's the tech part of this. So I think on the volunteer side, just a few quick tips. You guys probably all know this, but I'm just going to throw them out. You just want to make sure your setup is great, right? Whether you're a portable church or you've got a building, you just want to make sure your classroom environment is top notch. Because when you do that, it communicates something to the parents visibly, and it just gives them a sense like, wow, this church has it together. They kind of know what's going on. It looks good. It feels good. It's clean. It's well put together. Those kind of things, like, they're meaningful, even if it's not like a direct thought, but it makes an impact on parents, especially new families coming through the door, right? Or people that maybe are fairly new. They've been a couple times, 2-3 times, and they're kind of checking things out. So I think making sure your greeting area and your classroom areas are just really well put together. And you can do that whether you're small or big, right? I think you can be excellent in this area as a small church with a small budget. You can still do things well, just like big churches with bigger budgets and more staff. The other thing, when it comes to volunteers, like, train your volunteers to be amazingly hospitable, right? To greet the families coming in, big smiles. If your church is a hugging church, hugs, welcomes, like all the things that help you feel like you're not standing off to the side, again, especially if you're new. But it also, if you've been there for a long time, you just want to feel like, man, someone cares that I'm here. And if you're checking kids in, that's like a moment in time where maybe the greeters didn't get them or somebody else, ushers, but you go to check your kids in and you absolutely have a moment to like make an impact on that family by warmly welcoming them and helping them, kind of thing. So I'd say that's a big thing. And I think help direct people, right? If you got staff at the check-in booth or at the check-in area, help people know where to go, right? Give them some directions, or walk them to the classroom if they're new, like introduce them to the teacher for that class, like be helpful, make it feel like you have it. All of these things are signals that kind of help parents feel safe, right? You do all these things and it helps parents feel great about it. And again, this is definitely skews towards the new people, because hopefully if they're new and they're getting this experience, they're going to stick around, and they're always going to get that experience. So be helpful, act as a great host. Go ahead, Grant, you were going to jump in.
Yeah, well, I was just going to say, it reminds me, like, Danny Meyer has a book, Setting the Table. And for those of you that don't know Danny Meyer, he owns a lot of Shake Shack. So if you've been to Shake Shack, he's the founder of Shake Shack. He has several successful restaurants in New York City, like Gramercy Tavern. And he talks about the hostess is one of the most important roles in a restaurant. They interact immediately with the customer right when they get there. And he often tells the hostess, you have to be a hero. So it's just what Frank said. It's like, if they're new, welcome to the classroom. Ask them some questions, engage with them a little bit, smile. I mean, it's these little important things that go a long way when checking your kid in, especially for somebody new. And I really like just like those simple little tips there do go a long way.
Yep, absolutely. And engage with the kids, obviously engage with the parents, but say hi to the kids, get to know their names, those kind of things. The last one I'll mention, and we'll jump into the second section, is like, help if they're checking in, help them use the tech, right? Like, have someone there that's part of that experience. They don't have to be manning the machine necessarily, because you can do kind of check in on your own at a station, or you can have a manned station with volunteers. You can do it a number of different ways, but have someone around that is helpful, right? That can be there, answer questions or help people get over a issue or whatever it might be. Just so that there's not like, oh, I don't know what to do, haven't been here before, those kind of experiences. Or, sometimes there's just an issue, right? So have someone around that can help them through it. And Grant, go to the next slide.
The tech is important. I mean, at Disney World now, I mean, you've got a bracelet, you engage in check-in, check-out in several different ways. And this is a great solution to help improve the check-in experience. I mean, if you are still using paper or something where maybe it is an adequate or an older system, this is where I think Breeze can help, and you can walk us through this.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, again, I won't, not knowing the churches, right? Some of you guys might already be using text. Some of you might be, small, and paper is fine, right? So that's really not about, like, the whole first section was like, you can be any kind of church and not have tech at all, and doing those things. And that's going to help parents feel safe and welcome and love the kids' ministry. And then I think there's a stage in the church's life cycle based on size and complexity where technology starts to play a key role, right? So having the ability for parents to check in using technology, right? You get your kids registered, you get your family registered, like that helps you as a church know who's there, number one. It gets them checked in really, like once they have accounts, they're checked in really efficiently. They go up, they kind of search their name, they hit the, Frank walks in, hits the 3 kids, hits check in. And when you hit check in, it prints out the name tags, right? So the kid's name, their kind of unique code, those kind of things, so that you can put it on the kid. And now I'm the parent with the other side of that ticket. Like, I'm the only one that can get them out of class, right? This is the safety component, right? When you have that mechanism in place, the parent feels like, oh, okay, these are my kids. They've been tagged appropriately, and only dad can come pick them up now, right? Or maybe you've got a system, it's like mom or dad can come pick them up, but like you need the ticket to get them back out, right? So that's a component of safety that, as you get a little bit bigger, like really matters. And parents, especially if you get really, really big, I think you can be in that 200 to 500 range and still know a lot of people. You should have some tech in place. Certainly once you get past, I don't know, 300, 400, 500, you should have technology in place to do this, because there's a lot of other benefits that come, right? You get a check-in system, you make it really easy for stuff. Going back to the volunteers and all this, like, you want a system that volunteers can easily manage and be helpful with, right? Because the parents check in on their own. It's got to be easy for the parents to find their kids, check them in, get the name tag, get it printed out, put it on the kid, and get them in class, right? That's all got to be super easy. But then if the volunteers need to kind of troubleshoot something or help a parent, it should also be easy for the volunteers, right? So you just want a great check-in experience, right? Make it awesome. And then there's other things. I just want to call out a few things, right? Like, when you have a check-in system, it helps you know who your families are, how many kids are coming on a regular basis, who are the new people that are coming that you may not have seen before, who are the families maybe that have come for a long time and haven't been coming consistently. So it gives you a lot of this data where now you can run reports like on a weekly, monthly, quarterly, yearly basis and see what's going on in kids ministry from kind of a people and numbers perspective, so that how to, how many, what's the volunteer to kid ratio? Well, I have a system that tells me what that is, right? Like, how many families are coming every weekend? Who's new that I should follow up with and use this system to send them a welcome? Who's hasn't been coming that I should follow up with, and just see what's going on. Like, maybe something's going on in their lives. Maybe they moved and we didn't know. Like, there's lots of reasons why having a great kids check-in system is going to help you like care for your church, right? It's having tools that are supporting kind of the pastoral care of your church. And obviously all of that on the front end is going to make the parents feel great about what's going on. So I think when you combine the two, right? Great volunteers, great tech, those two things put together make families feel like, man, this is a great place, amongst all the other things you're doing, right? Like caring for people, preaching, teaching the kids, all the stuff Grant was talking about. You put it all together, you're going to have a place that parents love to bring their kids.
Yeah, I can see how the reports is a very powerful tool.
Yep.
We've used that before to engage with folks that we saw were dropping off, and maybe ask their parents if they wanted to come volunteer. And we found that was a good way to get them back re-engaged. So it's, those reports are can be very action driven.
Yep.
With the right leadership team, as you mentioned too, is like, hey, just a phone call or even a note, right? A handwritten note goes a long way, and these reports can give you a great list of people that maybe you should be reaching out to in some way, shape, or form. So yeah, that's what I can see.
If you every week run a report of who are the new families, and who are the families maybe that haven't shown up in X number of weeks, 2 weeks or 3 weeks or 4 weeks or whatever number you think is important for your church, right? And then you give that to the kind of pastoral staff that checks in on people, and they give them a phone call or send them a handwritten note or stop by the house or send them an email, whatever is appropriate for your church's kind of way of doing things. But you give the pastoral staff the opportunity, or even the head kids ministry staff the opportunity, to follow up with people appropriately to take care of them.
Yeah, we did a really cool thing where we sent out text messages about what the kiddos will be learning in like ministry next month, and
I
we'd
love
be
that.
really mindful of the reports and knowing like, oh, okay, maybe we can re-engage them text message like, hey, we're learning something really important next month.
Right.
Here's what it is. We saw that had a big impact too. So it's safety first. That's why I love this. And then it's what you can then do with the reports that I think can make a big impact on your ministry, and really bring attention to some people that do need potentially some help, or just a different way to engage with the church. So that's what's great about this.
I love that idea. Like it can go pre what's coming next month, and then it can also go every week after class, right? So you have your 5th grade class, and here's all the kids and the families that are in it in Breeze, and then you can send them a text message or an email with a link to the curriculum or whatever it might be. So here's what's coming, or here's what we learned today, right? They get a text message later that afternoon. Here's what we went over with your kids today. So families can now have a conversation at dinner, right? You're always kind of like, what'd you learn in church today on the drive home, right? That's the common parent question. But if you get it from the church, then you can go, okay, we'll bring it up at dinner because I know what they talked about, and we're going to talk about it as a family. So I love that kind of idea of using the technology to help you get better at equipping families too.
Just the right tools helps prevent burnout. If you have the data and the tools, you can do what a 100-person team took with just a handful of team members. So that's where Tithely and Playlister really want to help serve your churches. And to recap on the 3, we've got a couple of offers for you guys, and we'll get to that in one second. We'll put a bow on the webinar and talk a little bit about, just quickly, the recap. 1, get a presentation tool. This helps new volunteers and existing volunteers. Everyone's scared to talk in front of 27-year-olds, trust me, except for the chosen few. Number 2, use data and look at time. This is critical. Use your data and then look at how your time is spent as a team. Do that audit, and you'll uncover many things that are worthy of a discussion and probably worthy of trying to implement some sort of solution. And then 3, never skip on safety. You can take a few small steps to help improve safety. And then Frank outlined all of those. So those are the 3. Now, we're going to get into a big thank you. And we've got an offer, 2 offers that are pretty amazing. That's in essence, I think, of like $600 in value. So this is pretty great. We've got the Playlister promotion. So if you visit the Playlister website at playlister.app and sign up for an account, and then you go to purchase, use the promo code EASY, and you get a full year of Playlister for free and a brand new Apple TV. So this is only for the first 200 people. And that Apple TV will be shipped right to you with whatever address you put in. It's your Apple TV. And this really allows you to try out a presentation tool, maybe somewhere in your church where you need one. And this has over a $400 value to it. And then Frank's got another fantastic offer that we just talked about here as ways we can use report and safety with Breeze. So tell us a little bit about this, Frank.
Yeah. If you guys are, not using a piece of software or tech in your church, or, maybe if you're looking to upgrade or check out something new, you can go take a peek at Breeze Church Management. It does a bunch of things, but Kids Check-in is one of the primary features. We've got over 10,000 churches using it today, but we want to give you guys 3 months free. So your first 3 months, you can kind of get in. Our team helps get you all set up. get everything functioning, and then you won't pay anything for the first 3 months. And then after that, it's $67 a month. So it's still pretty cost effective, even once you do start paying. So would love for you guys to check that out. We're running this kind of special this month and for this webinar. So yeah, go take a peek.
Yeah, the reports are worth their weight in gold, as we've talked about, just as ways you can engage with your family. So I highly suggest that. And this has been fantastic. Frank, thank you
Yes.
so much. This has been great. Thank you, everybody that came in and joined. We are going to send everybody that came a link where you can rewatch this. We also have the PowerPoint we can send out to everybody so you can take a look at and appreciate it. And the promo codes will be part of the follow-up. So you'll have all of that information. And feel free to reach out to Playlister or Tidely with any questions you do have. We'll be emailing you after the webinar is over.
Love it. Thanks, Grant. This is good, dude.
All right. Yep. We'll see you. All right.
Thanks, everybody.
Bye, everybody. We'll see you.